Yes, okay, so let's continue Perek Mem Ches, meaning we will continue Parshas Vaychi with Perek Mem Ches, which we are going to begin in today's shir. First, a word on last week's shir. We noticed something, but there was a great question, something left unresolved. What we noticed was, and we discussed at length, was that Yaakov approached Yosef in with one kind of approach, one direction, and Yosef responded in a different tone, legamri. And just to review briefly, we noticed that this story of someone placing someone else under an oath to make sure to associate him with the right place parallels Avram being Mashbiah, the Eved, to get an Isha from his homeland, base Avi. Similarly, Yaakov wants to go back to Avoisov. The Eved talks about Chesed ve'emes, and Yaakov talks about Chesed ve'emes. Simno yod chatach hasirechi, of course, this is the most obvious parallel. And also we said the Shtach Havoya, they're both bowing. Okay. And we noticed the Medrash picks up on this, and the Medrash says, look at the difference between an Eved and a Ben Chayrin, Yosef, who's the opposite of an Eved. He's the king. An Eved, when you tell him Simon Yachad Tachas Yerechi, he does so. And Vayosam Eved is Yodai Tachas Yerech Avram Adoinov. And in the case of Yosef, pointedly, the pasuk does not say that Yosef did that. Instead, he says, "I'll do it." So the Medrash says, "Look, an Eved puts his hand under the Yerech of his master." Some people say putting the hand under the Yerech is actually a simon of Avdus. It means you're in my control. Chazal say it's Shavua by the Mila, but some say it's a declaration of the fact that you're under a declaration, but it's an indication that you're under someone else's control. Yosef, as the king, the ultimate Ben Chayrim, doesn't do that. Another reading, the Bahag says that Yosef can't put his hand under his father's Yarech. It's his father. You can't do that. You can't wash with your father. You can't bathe with your father, so you can't do that. So we noticed, okay, well, Yaakov asked him to do so. What do we make on that? What do we make of the fact that Yaakov is approaching Yosef as if he's an Eved, or as if, according to Bahag's reading, as if he's not his son? And Yosef responds and says, what are you talking about? I'm your son. I'm not going to put my hand in your right. I'm not an Eved. I will do it. I don't have to do this sign of subjugation. And maybe the sign of somewhat degrading sign of subjugation. So what's going on here? So that's what we noticed last week. And Yosef says, no, I'm your son. And it's very important that Yosef here is associating himself with Yaakov as his son, who's mamshech, his derech. And that goes along with the fact that Yaakov says, when I die, I go back to my fathers. I'm not in Mitzrayim, which means to say, we are, what our fathers were ultimately, which means that Yosef is what Yaakov is ultimately, not a Mitzri. And therefore, Yosef himself replicates it at the end of the parasha. The alternative would have been that Yaakov follows Yosef to Mitzrayim, like Yaakov thought once upon a time that he's going to follow Yosef to the grave. But Baruch Hashem, it worked out. He's following his fathers to the grave the way it's supposed to be, which means that a person ultimately is supposed to go back to his source and not follow his children. And similarly, Yaakov is not following Yosef to Mitzrayim, although he did, Vichai Yaakov time Shvas Yeshana, but ultimately he says this is only a temporary thing. We have to pull away from Mitzrayim and go back to where we came from. And Yosef recognizes that and thereby makes himself the true son of Yaakov. Fine, beautiful. The question was, what was Yaakov thinking by approaching Yosef as an Eved? He's the king of Mitzrayim. Now I realize that Yosef is the king of Mitzrayim, yes, but he became the king of Mitzrayim only by undergoing a period of Avdus. Le'eved nimka Yosef. He was actually at one point an Eved. So here's the idea. Maybe Yosef should be an Eved, because remember, all the Shurim would go back to, let's say, the end of Parshas Miketz. So the one who has the Gavir should be an Eved. Yosef says, right? They said whoever has the Gavir should die. Like, no, be an Eved. And as we discussed, what's happening over there is a code, a symbol for the following question. What should be done with someone who's not quite acting like Bnei Yisrael do? The fact that there's nichush is not a Yaakov kind of thing. Rachel did it. Rachel appreciated it. She stole the truffim that were worthless in the eyes of Yaakov. But Rachel does dabble in that, or does appreciate that, as does Yosef. And what that means is, to review something which discussed countless times, Yosef stands, and Rachel stands with the idea that sometimes Hashem is hidden, and therefore there is need to get clues from dreams and similar kinds of divinations appropriate to interact with a hidden God. Unlike Yirmiyah says in the parak where he chastises the dreamers, why would you rely on dreams if you can have prophecy, if you can have nevuah, where Hashem actually is present? But Yosef considers Hashem to be far. He considers Hashem to be far, and that's why the brothers want to kill him. And he does, and so he stands for something true. Sometimes Hashem is far. What do we do with that? So they think, no, embracing the distance of Hashem, we can't do that. We have to kill the person that does that. The truth is he was sold as an Eved. And that is what refined him and made him worthy of living up to his dreams. And what that means is that this kind of person who embraces the distance of Hashem should not be destroyed. Rather, he should be refined. Suffering will refine him, and Avdus will make Yosef, who is drawn to this way of life wherein Hashem is hidden, the Avdus will refine him. Okay. So now let's translate that into a little bit the types over here. We have Bnei Yisrael from the land of Canaan, the land of Nevuah. We have Mitzrayim, the land of suffering and of Hashem's concealment. And we have Yosef, who identifies as a Mitzri. He rises to power in Mitzrayim and commits himself to power. And the question is, what to make of that? Meaning, what to make of someone in Bnei Yisrael who embraces the non-Bnei Yisrael paradigm, the one of Hester, the one of not communicating with Hashem through Nevuah. What to make of him? Now, the truth is, we know exactly what's supposed to happen to him. He was supposed to become an Eved. Yeah. So that means he's not a Ben Chayim, he's not an equal member of Bnei Yisrael, but he can be refined, he can serve them, he can have a relationship with them, as long as he's kept under servitude, in a state of servitude. Maybe he can learn from that. Okay, Akapanim, exactly how you work that out. Servitude, avdos, slavery, is associated with Yosef, the dreamer. Yosef the Mitzri, Yosef the one who considers Hashem to be distant. So therefore, what's going on in this story is like this. Yaakov is not sure how Yosef views himself. Remember, Yaakov is not sure whether Yosef, let's think, it's very logical. Yaakov wants Yosef to bury him in the land of Canaan, not to bury him in Mitzrayim. Why would Yosef bury Yaakov in Mitzrayim if Yosef thinks that his way, the way of Mitzrayim, is the way of Bnei Yisrael, the correct way that they should all be taking? Then he thinks that actually the descent to Mitzrayim proves that his way is ideal. Right? That's one way to understand what happened here. Yosef stands for this way of Hester, and he thinks we can unlock more through Hester, as we've discussed. And the fact that we ultimately followed him to Mitzrayim proves that he's right, and that his way is the right way. Now, if that's the case, says Yaakov to Yosef, if you still believe in your unique path, which is different from my path of talking to Hashem, because Yaakov was a Navi who was loy nachash b'Yaakov, like Kesem Yisrael. If you still believe in your path over my path, then I believe that you should be an Eved. So therefore, I'm going to approach you as an Eved. I'm going to, please indulge me in my treating you as an Eved. I know you think differently. You don't think you're an Eved. What does it mean you don't think you're an Eved? There's three tzadim here. There's three positions Yosef could be in. Either Yosef holds he's a Mitzri, and being a Mitzri is lechatchila. That's what everyone should be. Or Yosef is going to be a Mitzri but serve as an Eved to Bnei Yisrael. And that's where Yaakov starts. Or he's going to say, no, I'm with you, really. Deep down, I'm with you. I'm actually your son. I have not created a new religion or a new path. If it's a new path, Legamri, that he broke away, then Yaakov says, well, the fact that you sold as an Eved is actually very appropriate, and therefore I am Misyachis to you the same way Avram was Misyachis to his Eved. There could be other people within the Jewish camp, but they're Avadim, they're second class, they're not equals. And if you consider yourself to be different from us and be like a Mitzri, then you're from like Lechom people who are Avadim, you are also an Eved, and do me a favor, I know you think you're a king, but I think you're an Eved, and I want you to indulge me with that. And that would perhaps explain the And Yaakov had to do it this way, because again, the tzad that Yosef won't bury him in Mitzrayim is that Yosef thinks that he's right. If he's right, then Yaakov is not going to appeal to him as you're my son, and you think I should be buried in Canaan. You don't. But then you're my Eved, in which case you should do it as my Eved. Yosef says, no need for that.
So why do you say no so many times?
Why does Yaakov say no?
Yeah.
If he's speaking to an Eved?
Well, yeah.
Avram also said Simno. Avram said no too. Simno yod chatach Viyachi, right?
Yeah, he says no. Okay, I see.
Simno yodecha ve'ashbiacha. So he only says no one time. Yaakov said no 3 times, I think we counted. Right. It seems, yeah. Well, I'm saying that the whole thing is a simulation, because of course Yosef is not an Eved, and to ask Yosef to act as an Eved is a big ask. Okay.
Yeah, you're basically asking Yosef, you think you're a melech.
Right. It's like, I know you think you're a melech, but I want to tell you something, that I'm not taking your perspective.
Mm-hmm. And how does he know that's not enough? How does he know that it's not a problem?
What's not a problem?
Why does he accept when what Yosef says?
Because Yosef answers him, says, I'm not an Eved and I'm your son. I'm not an Eved. Why am I not an Eved? Because I'm not a Mitzri. Rather, your son. In other words, the core message that you're trying to tell me, which is that I have to go back to my father, I actually agree with that myself. Mm-hmm. And therefore, the whole purpose of asking me for this kind of spiel is to foreclose the possibility that I don't identify with Canaan, but I really do, and therefore it's going to happen. Of course it's going to happen. It's no havamina, it wouldn't happen. And Yaakov says, okay, hishavali. Okay, but I still need the oath, because it's going to be more difficult than you think. You're going to have to call on this oath to give you permission. It's not going to be so simple. But I think it's very tight, very exact. Let's turn this on its head. If Yaakov is identified with Yitzchak and Avram, and Yosef also identifies with Yaakov and therefore Yitzchak and Avram, then of course he's going to take him back to the land of Canaan. He prepared his grave there, right? Like he says later. Like, why would you not bury him there? So as we discussed, because maybe if you're Yosef, you think, actually, finally everyone came around to me. If everyone came around to you, Yosef, Yaakov's like, no, we didn't. The fact that you were an Eved was l'chatchila. That's what we hold you should be. And I'm not going to convince you otherwise, because you can think what you want, and that ship has sailed. We've parted ways a long time ago. But I'm going to ask you a favor. As far as I'm concerned, you're an Eved, so would you do me that favor of respect the way I look at you, even though it's so difficult because it's the opposite of the way you look at yourself. And again, you look at yourself as a ben chayr, meaning a mitzri ben chayr, right? And Yosef says, no need. What you said is going to happen, because of course I also myself, and like Chazal say, I'm going to do the same thing at the end of the parasha, which means to say, what you're telling me is basic to me, right?
I'm going to say, take me to, right?
Yeah, I'm going to emulate what you're saying.
So the beginning and the end are connected then.
The beginning and the connected also means that it's like, you don't have to tell me to do this. I myself am going to do this, which means to say, like, there's no havamina. You're not asking me for a favor, right? It's a much deeper message. You're asking me for a favor. Right. You think I might not do it. I myself am going to do it myself. So you need the shvur.
And then
and he makes a shvur too. Vayishtachu, because amazing how it all worked out. Again, like by the Eved, where he bows after everything works out, as we discussed before this time. As I mentioned it, the Eved bows only when he actually succeeds in the mission. Yaakov bowed even before it was executed, because Yosef is here speaking as a king, and like the Gemara says in Mabasa, king, what he says happens. That's the whole point of here. Yosef is not speaking as an Eved, so therefore, yeah. And if he swore it's going to happen, and right, because the shvur is what's necessary, right? Okay. I think I alluded to this before, that Mitzrayim is associated with Avdus. First of all, we have the end of the last parasha that everyone in Mitzrayim became Avodim, And Beis Avodim, some people interpret Asher Tzichem Beis Avodim as the mitzvahs themselves are constituted as Avodim because they're descendant of Chum. So, and then we became Avodim Mitzrayim through Yosef, who was sold to them as Eved. But the point is, I'm trying to make out is that if Yosef is really a Mitzri, he identified with Mitzrayim, then we look at him like an Eved, and we're only willing to relate to him as an Eved. That's the most he can be to us. And therefore, that's what Yaakov says to him. And Yosef says, no, I am completely one of you. I'm one of you, I'm your son, I'm not a Mitzri. Amazing. Okay.
They're not also based on Avodim because every single mitzvah except for the Kahanim became Avodim Lefar.
Right. I think it's Rabbeinu Bachya says Beis Avodim, and he says because they're from Chum. But yeah, that's great. You say Beis Avodim, because they said, well, you know Avodim Lefari, right? Everyone, except for the Kahanim. Right. Very good. Yes. Very good. Right, the whole state was, all the citizens of the state were Avodim. Yeah, very good. Perek Memches, right. The serfs. Perek Memches. Pasuk Aleph, Vayhi. So I think that's satisfactorily resolved that problem we had. And I think now it's beautiful. So I just want to recap because also it's going to be relevant to the next parak. Vayhi Yaakov B'Tzayim Shvayas Eshana is that he rejuvenated, he had a new lease on life because of Yosef. That was Shir 1 on Parshas Vaychi. Shir 2 was, okay, based on the fact that he came back to life due to Yosef, that might suggest that now Yaakov is associating with Yosef. Chumash, no, he's pulling back the other way, and in fact, Yosef completely identifies the other way, going back to Yitzchak. I am just like you because you are just like your father. Okay, that's where we're up to now. Perek Memches, yeah.
He doesn't give a bracha to Yosef or his children until after.
Yes, Achri Advar Me'ela. So what does that tell you?
He required this
identification of the children with him.
Yes, when the children being with Israel, not Avodim. Right,
very good. And I guess maybe Yosef, as being the leader of the children, is the one that he's the linchpin. If you get Yosef,
who leads them what to be.
Right. So if he gets Yosef to identify with him, then the rest of them will come along.
Yeah.
Very nice.
Then that also indicates that they've already been taught that way in the first place.
Right. Very good. Excellent. Okay. Good. Vayhi acharei hadvar me'ela. So right away, as you just noted, but we see the pasuk is connecting the next story to the previous story. And just to orient us, as we discussed in the first year, this whole parsha is a remarkable parsha because it's a parsha about a death, essentially. Yaakov's death certificate, like the standard expression of he was such and such when he died, age, is not repeated at the time of Yaakov's death. Only the first pasuk of the parsha, because the first pasuk of the parsha is already declaring it's time for Yaakov to die. Here's how he died. And then there's Yaakov's death is then recounted in 3 acts, you can say. The first one is Vayikavuri Mesa Lamos, the previous parsha. Then it's Achri Advar Me'ela calls to Yosef. Not he calls to Yosef. Yosef comes, and then Vayikra Yaakov Abanov, and that brings us to the end of Perek Memtes and Vayikva Yosef. So those are 3 halakim. Okay. But let's see what happened here. Vayomer LeYosef, and he said to Yosef, anonymous. And the next pasuk too, Vayagid Yaakov Vayomer. There's an anonymous, someone behind the scenes orchestrating, telling people what they need to know. And significantly, this suggests that Yosef was not invited by his father to come. Vayomer LeYosef, hine avicha chole. Someone told Yosef, your father's failing, so you probably want to go hear last words or something like that. But this is not Yaakov summoning Yosef significantly, as opposed to Vayikra Yaakov Abanov, the next parsha, Vayikra Yaakov Abanov. He has something to tell him. But here, apparently, Yaakov didn't feel he had something specific to tell Yosef, even though he told him something very, very important. No, someone told Yosef, it's Yosef's initiative to come. It's really this guy suspected that Yosef probably wants to know, or maybe Yosef told him to tell him or something like that. But it's not coming from Yaakov. What? Right. There's someone. Right. There's someone. It's interesting how there's someone anonymous doing this.
Someone anonymous is important enough to be an active party.
Exactly. You could have had Vaye Amar Yosef and Vayugad Yaakov, right? No, there is a person who's active but nonetheless anonymous. Good. What?
At least a speaker.
Right. right? Some say it's Ruach HaKodesh. Okay, now he told Yosef, Hini avicha chayla, because Yosef is the main son. Vayikra livnoi li Yosef, 3 psukim prior, and okay, we'll get to the other psukim soon. Bincha Yosef, the next pasuk, Yosef is the main ben. Ki ered el bani avel shayla, he's considered like a ben yachid. So he's the one who's told, right? So what? Right. Oh, exactly. There's just 2. Yeah. There are only 2. Right. Yeah. Yeah. Yes.
Well, okay.
And there's Binyamin. Yeah. Okay. But upon him, so it's told to Yosef because he's the main son. Now let's be medayik. Let's read very carefully. So what does Yosef do? Vayikach eshnei vanav imay es Menashe v'es Ephraim. What does Yosef do? He takes his 2 sons with him. Okay? It doesn't even say that he went to his father. That's not what the pasuk says. It could have said Vayelech Yosef im shnei banav. No. The pasuk makes, the verb is he took his 2 sons with him. So obviously that means with him, he went. Mm-hmm. But the focus of the pasuk is that he took his 2 sons, Menashe and Ephraim. Okay? Now.
Note that he's active, they're not.
Right. And the next pasuk, Vayagid the Yaakov Vayomer, who he announced the arrival of Hine Bincha Yosef Bo'elecha. Whoever announced the arrival did not, but he didn't announce that his 2 sons are with him, which is why, exactly in pasuk Ches, Vayar Yisrael es b'nei Yosef v'yom, because the Vayagid Vayomer announced Yosef's arrival. Didn't say Yosef is here with his 2 sons. Yosef is here. We know, because Pasuk Alf tells us that he took his 2 sons with him, but Yaakov didn't know, and therefore when he saw them, he noticed them. He said, "Who's this?" Okay, so the sons over here are very significant in that, as we mentioned, all the pasuk says is what Yosef did to his sons. That's apparently the key fact, not even the fact that he went. The key fact is that he took his 2 sons. Those 2 sons are then not announced, and then the whole story revolves around the 2 sons. They're going to become like Reuven and Shimon, and then Yaakov sees them. Who are these? Okay, so that's what we have to think about. What's that all about? Why is that? What's the point? What's the point of saying that Yaakov didn't summon him, but he came and he took his 2 sons, and why is that so significant that he took them, and that everything then revolves around? Okay. I wanted to say at another point of view, Vayagid, as we said, so it doesn't say who. Some say it's Ruach HaKodesh, and the Medrash connects this beautifully to Magid Dvarav L'Yaakov, Chukum Mishpat Yisrael, Mizmor Kuf Mem Zayin, the one that we keep on going back to. Magid Dvarav L'Yaakov. Yaakov knows the Dvar Hashem. He knows what he has to know. And prior to that, it says also Hashalech Imra Soy Oretz. Hashem sends the Imra, so we could say Vayagid Vayomer. Basically, Yaakov knows what you have to know. And as we'll see when we learn the Parsha further, the Parsha is about a kind of supernatural knowledge. Yaakov can't see, but he sees. He knows better than Yosef thinks he can't see, which is Menashe, which is Ephraim, which is the older, which is the younger, but really he sees in Yisrael Kavdim Mizaikim, but he sees with a godly kind of Re'iyah. So the stage is set for the fact that...
Contrast with Shmuel and the Nevuah.
Yeah.
Right?
Very good. Can't see.
Shmuel could see only physically.
Only to the Inayim. Right. Very, very interesting. Yeah. Very interesting. So Yaakov here has the extraordinary kind of sight. And the Parsha sets the stage, Vayagid, Vayomer. He finds out what he needs to find out. Now, again, notably, he doesn't know that the 2 sons are there. Okay? It's even more sharp, right? If Yaakov is being told by Ruach HaKodesh what he has to know, so apparently he doesn't have to know 2 sons are there, which is interesting. Okay.
Well,
even though everything revolves around the sons.
He's saying whether they're there or not.
I know, but the whole thing revolves around the sons, and it was important that Yosef brought the sons for some reason. And but Yaakov didn't know that. Okay, fine. By the way, he took his 2 sons, Menashe and Ephraim. Sounds like he didn't have any more sons than that. We'll see when we get to the psukim later. Pasuk Vav Umolalto Hashat. I mean, he had other sons. This pasuk sounds like these were his only 2 sons. We shall see. Vayischazek Yisrael vayeshev al hamita. So he gathered his strength because he was a chayla. He was lying on the bed. But now that Yosef arrived, after he heard that Yosef was here, he got some strength. So it's like there's some turning in the story. He's sick, he's dying, but Yosef's here, he can be mischazik. Perhaps it's pointing to the fact that it's Yosef that gives him the strength. He knows that there's Yosef. He knows that there's Yosef who just demonstrated, just demonstrated loyalty to him and being his true ben, so that gives him the strength he needs. Or it's that the pasuk is saying he needed some more strength. Like now that Yosef is here, there was one thing that he needed to do, which is to give over to his sons, so therefore he got the strength he needed to do what he has to do. Vayeshev al hamita. So he's sitting. Remember, we had the mita before. The mita of Yaakov is for some reason very important. This pasuk is structurally very similar to that one. Vayishtachu Yisrael al hamita. Vayeshev. Vayischazik Yisrael vayeshev al hamita. Okay. It could be the mita here is significant because it's the bed of death. Last time we said like Chazal say mitasa shleima, the bed of procreation, but it could be means the bed of death. And Yaakov is on his deathbed. But the death of Yaakov, which gets a whole parsha of it, you said the whole parsha is about Yaakov's death. Amazing thing. Like this is the death scene of Yaakov. And Yaakov's death is so significant. Which of course reminds us of Yaakov in Ulay maybe. It's like the death that we're going to talk about for a whole parsha. So that's why the mita maybe is so.
Also divided into so many parshas.
Yeah. I know. Yeah. Right. Okay, very good. The mita comes up again at the end of Perek Mem Tes. Vaychal Yaakov l'tzav esbonov, vayesef raglav alamita. Why did it say vayesef raglav alamita? Because he was yeshev alamita the whole time. The Rashbam says this. The vayeshev, we always read this, right? We always tend to read things piecemeal. But you look at the whole picture over here, you realize that, okay, Yaakov sits up on the bed, and then when he dies, after he's mitzav esbonov, it says vayesef raglav alamita. So says Rashbam, it's pretty obvious, that he's sitting on the bed throughout. Vayikra Yaakov abonov, Yosef comes in with Menashe and Ephraim. He does what he does. And then he calls him. Yosef is still there. And he's still sitting on the bed. And that's why when it's time for him to die, the pasuk says, well, he's sitting. He died sitting. No. Because his legs, he was sitting on the bed, like our beds. The Ibn Ezra says, apparently the Muslims had low beds. So Ibn Ezra says, no, this is like the beds that they have in the Christian countries, which are higher. So you could sit on it, and his legs then are hanging over the bed. That's why it says also, the Ibn Ezra points out also in Pasuk Yud Beis in Perek Mem Ches, Vayetze Yosef in Birkov. His knees. What are his knees? Because he's sitting on the bed, so it's amazing. The Torah is painting a picture. You don't know exactly the position that the tzaddik was in. He's on the bed, his legs are over the bed. Therefore, his grandchildren come to his knees, and when it was time for him to die, he picks up his legs. I added that. Okay, it doesn't say picks up, but he brings his legs back into the mita. And that's when he dies. Okay, so it gets a lot of attention here. Now, as we said, the whole death of Yaakov gets all this attention. There's a whole scene about Yaakov's death. Significantly, and I never realized this before, at least I don't remember realizing it before, you know whose death is missing from Bereshis? You know whose death notice? Esav's. Yeah, Yishmael had a death notice, right? Yishmael got one at the end of Parshas told us. Where does Yishmael get his? Let's see. Let's see. Where's Toldos Yishmael, end of Chayesar. The end of Parshas Chayesar, we have Toldos Yishmael ben Avram. That at the second last pasuk there of Chayesar, it tells us the death of Yishmael and his age. And then it continues with the Toldos Yitzchak ben Avram. So we have the Toldos of Yishmael, we have the Toldos of Yitzchak. We have the Toldos of Esav, we have the Toldos of Yaakov. Toldos of Esav at the end of Parshas Vayishlach. We have the Toldos Esav, who Edom, Perek Lamed Vav. And then the beginning of Parashat Yeshav, Ela Toldos Yaakov, Yosef ben Shvaas Yeshana, right? So the Toldos of Edom should have ended with a summary mention of his death and his age. Does not. And perhaps this has to do with the fact that Yaakov's death gets so much detail. It's as if to say that this is the death. This is the way to die. Which is not a death, right? That's what I'll say. So I don't know. There may be some connection there, but the Medrash notices this also. Why is no death of Esav? Haloi davarhu. I think it says the Medrash says Esav didn't die in his bed.
Well,
Right? He's a gangster. What? And there's the Mita of Yaakov, right? So I guess maybe we're reading the Mita. Because look how Yaakov died. He died on his bed, surrounded by his children. Right? And maybe we're supposed to read in there like, okay, this is the right way to die. Pashas Vaychi describes the right way to die. Amazing. But Esav not. I don't know. Okay, so let me review the questions that we have, and then I'll tell you what I think is going on. But the questions are like this. How is it that Yaakov didn't summon Yosef, but then Yosef comes and he has such a super important thing to tell him that your two sons are like Reuben and Shimon? That's one question. Why did Yosef, what?
Why didn't he summon him?
Yeah. How is it that Yosef happened to come? Because like he says, oh, my father's dying, I'll come. And then it turns out that Yaakov has an extremely important thing to tell him. So why didn't Yaakov summon him? Why does it say that he took his two sons? And why is it significant that Yosef took his two sons? Anyways, Yaakov doesn't see them. So what's going on here?
Oh, he brought them for what he asked for later.
He didn't ask for anything. Yaakov asked. Yosef didn't ask for anything. Right. Rashi says he brought them to be blessed. Rashi says that. I'll tell you what appears to me.
Yeah.
Why is Yosef coming in without being summoned? Because we just established in the previous parsha that Yosef is his true son, Vayikra Yaakov Levnai, Yosef. And Yosef lived up to being Yaakov's son, identifying with him to the extent that he's going to actually emulate him and do what his father did, right? So, if Yosef is so identified with his father, then, same way Yosef is automatically going to hasten to his father's bedside at his death. It's the most obvious thing. Go. Why are you going? Because of course he's going. Well, then his sons are going to go also. So in other words, Yosef is anticipating that his sons are like Yaakov's sons. It's foreshadowed. The fact that Yosef's sons are like Yaakov's sons is actually foreshadowed in the very fact that Yosef took them. Because they told Yosef, and Yosef, instead of going, that's the whole story. That's the whole story. The point is not that he went. The point is, he told Yosef, and Yosef said, guys, you guys are coming with me. That's the whole part is right there. Because right over there, Yosef anticipated that I am my father. I just established my connection to my father to such an extent that and I am him, and whatever he is, I am. Yeah. And he go back to Canaan, and it's Pasha to me, and identify with him. Then my sons have to be there when he dies. And in fact, Taka, he walks in, and what does Yaakov say? With Mishimon. He confirms that. Yeah. So then I would say, it's not that Yaakov didn't have to call him to tell him Reuven Mishim, tell him that his sons are like Reuven Mishim, because the whole idea that they became upgraded to Reuven Mishim happened when Yosef took them. Yeah. That's where that's the one who initiated that his son should be equivalent to the sons of Yaakov by taking them.
But Yaakov didn't know that. How does he say it?
Okay.
Because he knows it.
Because he knows. He knows what he doesn't see. Right. So in other words, Yaakov is actually the point is that Yaakov didn't see them, and yet did exactly what the fact that they were there necessitated. So the fact that Yaakov didn't see them, he said, who is this? Like, actually, there's a Ephraim and Menashe. And Yaakov's like, oh, they're here. Why are they here? Yaakov didn't expect them to be there, but they're here. Why are they here? Because you just said, of course they're here. Because if Yosef has to be here, and you just upgraded the sons of Yosef to be like your own sons, then that's why they're here.
Well, he said before he asked them who they are, before he asked them who they are, he said...
Right. I know, so what? So what?
So you can't say that he knew that they were there.
Right.
He knew that they were going to be Kiruvim.
Which then means they should be there.
Right.
And lo and behold, he was there. So in other words, what Yaakov discovered was that Yosef anticipated what he was doing here. Right. Okay. So Yaakov will do it.
But then the question is, why didn't the others come?
The other children? Yeah. Okay. So I was saying that these are Yosef's children, so they're like Yosef. Now you're going to push back and say it doesn't say this. It's like Reuben and Shimon. I was saying if Yosef is like his father, then his sons are to his father like he is to his father. But I hear he's saying it doesn't.
You're saying these are sons, not grandsons, so they have to.
But okay, but the problem is, like you said, his other children didn't come until they were called. So no, so even if they're like his children, are they like Yosef, who comes without being summoned? Like no, I'm saying Mechdeis. Okay, that's a good question.
Well, he's the one who summoned them.
Who?
Yosef.
He summoned them.
He's the father who summons them.
Vayikach, he could summon them.
Yeah.
Okay, that's interesting.
Maybe. But then why didn't the others come? And don't tell me they're not like it.
No, the other ones.
They're also brought up.
Vayikra.
They also left with Zion with Bnei Yisrael. They made sure.
The other children of Yosef?
Of Yaakov.
No, he calls them. What do you mean?
But why did he
Yosef
call
comes without. Why did who call them?
Why did Yaakov have to call his other sons?
Because only Yosef comes without being called.
Why?
Because he's his
He's
real
more
son.
like him, except he's not. If your whole point that he's like his father in that he's going to, I'm also coming out of Mitzrayim with you.
I do what you do. Yosef is the one who's most like Yaakov. Chazal say that. They'll tell us Yaakov Yosef, everything that happened to Yaakov happened to
He's more
Yosef.
like him, okay.
He's most like him, except that he had this weird thing that he became a mitzvah, and here he's repudiating that. I am still you, exactly. I am still you, then more than anyone else, yes.
So therefore
Then more
he
than anyone else.
anticipated that he should come, whereas the other
Yes.
ones did not anticipate.
Right.
So I have another way of reading it.
Okay, unless
Is any good.
okay, unless it adds. Could we leave it and tell me afterwards?
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll leave it. Let's stick to this. Okay, so that's the point over here that Yaakov didn't summon them, and then he had a whole message because the fact that Yosef came with his children is what initiates this idea.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a continuation of the previous parak. That Yosef just established himself as being the real son of Yaakov, not an Eved, and therefore he's here. Now I realized something we pointed out last week, that in the brachas of Yaakov it says Reuven, Shimon, Levi, Yehuda, Yisachar, everyone's called by name, even Binyamin, and Yosef gets Bain, Peiras Yosef. So last week we noted, okay, they're all called by name, but Yosef is Stam Bain. But there's actually something much better.
Bain twice.
Yeah, there's actually something much better here, which is that Yaakov summoned his children.
Mm-hmm.
He calls them around. He's like, okay, guys, come. Reuven, Shimon. So when he calls their name, it's not just that he's starting the blessing. Like we have by, let's say, contrast that to Moshe, where it says, Ulegad Amar. This is what he's saying to each of them.
Mm-hmm.
In the case of Yaakov, it's actually not just saying, it's not just here's what he said to Reuven. He said, Reuven, Shimon, he called their names, right? Why is he calling their names? Because he summoned them all. He summoned them, okay, you come, and I'll call you one by one when it's your turn. Yosef was not summoned. He's there already because he came without being summoned, and therefore he doesn't call his name, because calling their name is a continuation of the summons. Vayikra Yaakov Labanov, and then he called to them as a group, and then he called out to each of them one by one. But Yosef, who was standing there, Yosef was actually running this meeting as the king, as the one who's here by his father's bedside, because his father's dying. Of course, I'm right here. So Bain, Yosef, my son who's here, he's not the one that Yaakov's called. It's an amazing thing. And the beautiful thing is, furthermore, is that what established Yosef as the one who doesn't have to be called? Previous parasha, where it says Vayikra Levnei Yosef. So Yosef also had his kriya. Vayikra Levnei Yosef. And he said, don't bury Mitzrayim. And he said, established the kriya that he had to Yosef then, established that Yosef actually doesn't have to be called. And therefore, the next time, Yosef comes without being called, but the brothers are called. As we discussed, because it's all hemshech, right? We mentioned before, Yaakov sitting on the bed till the end. So it's all one scene from Perek Memches through end of Perek Memches is one scene. Okay, so that's the hemshech of this previous parsha, that Yaakov lived in Mitzrayim due to Yosef. So he has a strong identity with Yosef, which can go in one of two directions. Either that would suggest that he's going towards Yosef's way of life and would be buried in Mitzrayim. That's the Chumash, and that no, I'm not coming to you. You have to come to me. And Yosef says, yes, I'm going to come completely to you. Okay, so I think that's where we answered the questions. That's why Yaakov didn't summon him, because it's actually the coming with his sons, which anticipated and initiated this idea that his sons are like Yaakov's sons. That's why the pasuk just says Vayikach, because that's the whole point. And the point is that a message to Yosef, for some reason Yosef took that and extended that to his sons. That's the whole chiddush. I think if you think about that, by the way, it's very pashut. It's like, we read this, we're so used to reading things, Islam is a big lesson. We're so used to reading things that whatever we see happened further in the parsha, that's why something happened in the first instance. So it's like, oh, why did he bring his sons? Oh, because something's going to happen with them. And like you see, something happened with them, right? Like he's bringing them for a purpose. But if you read it very closely, as we just did, it's really an interesting thing. It's like you told his son, someone's on his deathbed, and you told his son that he's dying. You didn't even tell all the sons. You told one of his sons, because he's the one that's of course going to be there. And what does he do? He takes his two sons. What is he doing taking his two? It's almost it's inappropriate. We didn't even invite the rest of the family, the closest family. Reuven and Shimon are not closer than Ephraim and Manasseh. What are you doing? That's the point of it. The pasuk's making a point. The message was to Yosef, your father's sick. And he should have been like, okay, guys, Ephraim and Asher, take care of the house. I got to go to Zaidi. And no, instead he says, you're coming with me. That's the whole point. See, that's the pasuk's bringing out. The whole point is that Yosef takes something that should have been just for him, and he's like, I'm taking my two sons. And that's foreshadowing the whole parish.
And only
amazing? And only them. Yeah.
no other sons.
Right. No other sons. So that's what you have to see. Right. No, the brothers, no other sons. Maybe he had other sons, but these are, okay, we'll get them when we get there. Okay. Shkoyach.